There's a road in California where, on certain winter mornings, the world ends 10 feet past the hood. The Highway Patrol has measured visibility on that road at 10 to 15 feet. Feet, not car lengths, roughly the distance from a driver's eyes to the front bumper of the vehicle ahead, plus a little. On a clear winter morning in California's Central Valley, a person standing on the shoulder of that same highway can see for 20 miles. Nothing is in the way. No cliffs, no canyons, no ridgelines, no surf. Just squared green fields running to a flat gray line at the edge of the world. Irrigation canals ruled straight across them, rows of almond trees stitched in perfect columns, and a road laid down the middle of it all like a seam. It is the least dramatic drive in America, and that is not an insult. It is the whole point. 20 miles of sightline, and then on a scheduled morning between November and March, 15 feet. The same eye, the same windshield, roughly 7,000 times less road. At highway speed in that white, you see the car you are about to hit only once it is far too late to stop. On mornings like that, this one highway has produced pileups of 17 vehicles, of 59, of 74. Once, 86 vehicles folded into a single mile of asphalt, and the people who die in them are very often not killed by the crash. They survive the impact. Then they get out of the car and they are struck by a driver who never saw them. The Central Valley grows roughly 8% of the agricultural output of the United States by value, on less than 1% of the country's farmland. It is orchards and dairies and truck stops and little league fields. And in one analysis of federal crash records, this highway carried the highest rate of fatal accidents of any highway examined, more than 60 for every 100 miles of road, ahead of the worst stretches in Texas. The valley does not look dangerous. That is the danger. And the strangest part of it is not that the fog kills people on a schedule, it is that the fog is disappearing. The Central Valley is a trough. It runs roughly 450 miles north to south and 40 to 60 miles across, about 18,000 square miles of ground so level that a farmer can flood a field simply by opening a gate at one end. It is not open country. It is walled. The Sierra Nevada rises along the eastern edge, snow on the peaks from November onward. The coast ranges run up the west side in dry brown folds. The Tehachapi's close the bottom. Seen in cross-section, it is a bowl with high sides and a flat floor. A bowl holds things. It holds water, which is why the valley grows food. It holds air, which is why the valley carries some of the worst particulate pollution in the United States. Dust off bare fields, exhaust from freight locomotives and irrigation pumps, and the endless procession of refrigerated trailers hauling produce north. And on certain winter mornings, it holds fog the way a cup holds milk. Before the fields, the floor of this bowl was marsh, standing water, black soil and thickets of tall green reed called tule growing head-high in the shallows. The reeds are mostly gone now, drained and squared and planted over. The name stayed. The fog that forms here is still called tule fog, after a plant most drivers on that highway have never seen, and the road runs straight through the middle of it. The highway is 424 miles of California's spine, and it is the most reassuring road imaginable. It is flat and straight. There is a gas station every few exits, a fruit stand with a hand-painted sign, a taqueria in a converted service bay, a hospital at either end. Cell coverage is good. Towns with stoplights and pharmacies come along steadily, the whole length of it. Ask most people to picture a deadly American landscape and they produce the same image. A lone vehicle broken down on a desert interstate, no bars on the phone, 100 miles to water. That is a story of emptiness, and it kills slowly, over days. Here the road is full. Commuters, school runs, farm trucks, 16-wheelers hauling tomatoes, families with a thermos of coffee in the cup holder and a dog in the back seat. Help is close. And the valley kills not one person alone over 3 days, but dozens of people together in 15 seconds, in a crowd, in the middle of an ordinary weekday commute, on a road they have driven 400 times. The valley has other ways to hurt people. Dust lifting off a disked field carries the spores of a soil fungus that causes valley fever. The spores live in the top few inches of ground and go airborne whenever that ground is disturbed by digging, driving, or wind. The winter air trapped by those same mountains is thick enough to keep air quality warnings posted for weeks. The highway has a crash problem that has nothing to do with weather, aging interchanges, heavy freight, on-ramps built for a smaller century. None of them empties a mile of highway in 15 seconds. NASA describes the one that does in about the plainest terms an agency can use. Tule fog is a major hazard to navigation and the leading cause of weather-related accidents in California. It arrives on a timetable. It waits for the first significant rain of the season to soak the soil. It needs a clear night and a still one. It comes between November and March. It is the most predictable killer in the state. Fog is the one hazard that is nothing but visible, until a driver is inside it, and then it is the only one that shows nothing at all. After the first real rain, the ground of the valley is wet, and wet ground gives up water vapor. On a clear, windless night, that ground radiates its heat straight up into space, with nothing overhead to hold it in, no cloud deck, no marine layer. The soil cools. The air in the first few feet above it cools with it, and cold air is heavy, so it stays put, pooling on the flat floor of the bowl like water finding the low spot. Above it, a lid forms. Warmer air settles on top of the cold layer instead of underneath it, which is backwards from the way the atmosphere usually stacks, an inversion, meaning a ceiling. Nothing mixes or vents. The moisture has nowhere to go but sideways, across 18,000 square miles of level ground. Then, at some point in the small hours, the cold air reaches the temperature at which it can no longer hold its water, and the vapor condenses into droplets. That is the fog, not weather that moves in from somewhere, but the valley's own breath, cooling in place. It thickens toward dawn. It can lie there for days, and in a long inversion it barely lifts at midday. The sun turns it the color of a light bulb behind a bed sheet and then loses. Under it, the orchards go silver, the tractor seats bead with water, the tail lights of the car ahead swell into two soft red circles with no edges. The layer is shallow. From the foothills above it, the valley on those mornings reads as a white floor, level and blank, with the tops of the transmission towers standing out of it in a line. Clear blue overhead, and nothing at all at eye level. And it does not spread evenly. Tule fog forms in banks, thicker over the wet ground of a flooded field or the cold cut of a river bottom, thinner where the land is drier or the air is stirred. A driver at highway speed does not descend into it gradually. The driver travels a mile in clear morning air with the sun coming up orange over the Sierra and the wipers off, and then crosses a line. Visibility in Tule fog does not fade. It collapses. The instinct at that moment makes it worse. A driver who hits the high beams is throwing more light into a wall of suspended droplets, and the droplets throw it back as a bright white glare directly into the windshield, less useful than the low beams were. The information available shrinks to a pair of red circles ahead and a white line sliding under the left front tire. At 65 miles an hour, a vehicle covers roughly 95 feet every second. At 55, about 80. Those are not aggressive speeds, they are the speeds of a person going to work. In the worst of it, the highway patrol has put visibility at 10 to 15 feet. At 95 feet per second, 15 feet of sight distance is less than 2/10 of a second of warning, faster than a blink. Nothing useful happens in a human body in that time. On a better morning, the estimate might be 100 to 200 feet, which sounds enormously improved. It is 1 to 2 seconds, roughly the interval it takes an unsurprised driver to register that something is wrong and move a foot from one pedal to the other, before the brakes have done anything at all to the car's momentum. Then the tires still have to stop 2 tons of steel and glass and groceries, which takes hundreds of feet more. So even at the good visibility, a driver spends the entire sight distance deciding to brake. And at the bad visibility, the obstacle does not exist, and then it is the windshield. The first impact is only the beginning of the mechanism. It leaves two vehicles stopped crosswise in a travel lane, engines steaming, glass on the asphalt, hazard lights blinking, and those hazard lights are visible for 15 feet. Everything upstream is still moving at highway speed, still in clear air or thin fog, still unaware because no warning device on Earth outruns a car that has already passed it. The third car arrives, then the fourth. Each one experiences the identical event in its own private 0.2 of a second, and each one adds to the obstacle for the car behind. The wreck grows toward oncoming traffic like a wall being built from the wrong side. A crash is one event. A pileup is the same event, repeated by people who could not possibly have known. In a heavy freight corridor, the arithmetic gets worse, because a loaded semi-trailer needs substantially more room to stop than a sedan does, and it is often the trucks that arrive last into a scene already dozens of vehicles deep. The impact is survivable far more often than people assume. Modern cars are extraordinarily good at absorbing a single collision. So a driver comes to rest, dazed, airbag dust hanging in the cabin, radio still playing, and discovers something wonderful. They are alive. And then they open the door. They open it because someone in the next car is screaming. They open it because the smell of fuel is in the cabin. They open it because they want to see the damage, or wave the next car down, or check on the child in the back of the vehicle they just hit. Every one of those reasons is decent, and several of them are correct in almost any other kind of crash. But a person standing on a foggy highway is smaller than a car, darker than a car, and lit by nothing. The 15 feet of visibility that failed to reveal a stopped sedan will not reveal a man in a jacket. The single most human response to surviving is the one the valley converts into a fatality. That door has opened again and again across more than 35 years, and it is almost never the same person twice. Point 3. The valley has been doing this for as long as there have been commuters on that road, and the events rhyme so closely you could set them to a metronome. It starts on a stretch between two farm towns, vineyards on both sides, packing sheds, a water tower going in and out of view. The fog sits over the roads the way it has sat over them all week. The crashes do not happen as a single event, but as a succession of them, one wreck feeding the next up the highway. When it ends, somewhere between 40 and 60 vehicles are involved. 30 people injured, 5 dead. It is a Tuesday. Nobody calls it a once-in-a-generation event, which turns out to be correct. Barely a year later, a short drive up the same road, 74 cars, 30 injured, 4 killed. And among those 4 is a woman whose name did not survive in the record the way the numbers did. What survived is what she did. She was in a vehicle that was hit. She got out of it, and she was struck. She had already survived the part most people picture when they picture a highway crash. What remained was not the wreck, but the ordinary traffic of an ordinary Thursday morning, arriving at ordinary speed through fog, into a lane where a person was now standing. She was not reckless. She was standing on a road, which is a thing nearly everyone has done, after a fender bender, changing a tire, retrieving a receipt that blew out the window. On any other morning, it is a mildly annoying inconvenience. A few mornings out of the year, it is fatal. Later that decade, at the very start of a fog season, it happens again. Same highway, same flat country of packing sheds and orchards running to the shoulder. 74 vehicles again, the exact same number. That one burned. 51 people injured, 2 killed, and the wreckage came to rest in 4 twisted heaps across the southbound lanes, which is what the sequence produces, not one long line of damage, but clusters, each one a place where the highway packed a group of arriving cars into the group ahead of them. A 25-mile stretch of highway, a small county's worth of road, stayed closed for nearly 12 hours, because of water vapor. Then the worst of them, 86 vehicles in 3 large clusters strung along not quite 1 mile of highway, 41 people injured, 2 killed. In the first hours, with responders working in from both ends and no way to see the middle, officials believe the count might reach 108. Sedans, pickups, delivery vans, big rigs, enough traffic to fill a supermarket parking lot, all of it accordioned into a single mile of a road that anybody in the county could drive half asleep. Every one of those drivers had made the same decision, which was to keep moving at the speed of the traffic around them, on a road they knew. Then the pattern went quiet enough that a person could believe it was history. It was not. On a recent January morning, southbound in 10 to 15 feet of visibility, 17 vehicles. A man of 61 survived the collision. He got out of his car and he was struck and killed. Another occupant of the same vehicle died 3 days later. More than 3 decades after the unnamed woman, on essentially the same stretch of the same highway, in essentially the same weather, a person opened a car door for what was almost certainly a good reason, and the sequence closed on him exactly as it had closed on her. 20 days later, in the next county south, it happened again. 59 vehicles. Visibility estimated at 100 to 200 feet. The highway closed in both directions. About 10 people injured, and nobody died. The difference between 59 vehicles with 10 injuries and 86 vehicles with 2 fatalities is not the drivers, not the cars, not the road. It is 100 feet of visibility and a great deal of luck. 6 of these, inside roughly the same 50-mile stretch of one highway, all in the same 5 months of the calendar, all involving people who were driving to work. Every one of them knew that fog reduces visibility. It is not obscure information. It is on the driver's license test. So why did they not slow down? Point 4. Because the road told them not to, and the road is very convincing. At 6:40 in the morning in January, nobody out there is exploring. They are going to a job at a packing house or a hospital or a school on a route driven so many times that the driving has been handed over to the part of the brain that does not narrate. This is not a failure of intelligence. These were commuters, parents, truck drivers with clean records and 30 years behind the wheel doing what the road invited them to do. A straight, flat, familiar highway, at the speed everyone drives it, on a morning that looked like every other morning. Optimism bias comes first. The well-documented tendency to accept that a risk is real in general while quietly assuming it will not land on us in particular. Every driver in the valley knows that highway has fog pileups. Almost none of them expects to be in one. Both beliefs feel entirely reasonable at the same time, and they can be held together for a lifetime without ever colliding, because for almost everyone the second one is true. Underneath that sits arithmetic. A commuter drives that road twice a day, 5 days a week, hundreds of trips a year. Fog is on it a few dozen mornings, fog thick enough to kill. In the exact place that commuter happens to be on the exact morning is a handful of minutes out of a decade, which means the road spends 10 years teaching a lesson that is wrong. Every uneventful foggy morning is a small, persuasive piece of evidence that driving in fog is fine. The brain is doing what it evolved to do, updating on experience. This particular hazard is rare enough to be trained against and severe enough to be unsurvivable, and human learning is not built for that combination. We are excellent at hazards that punish us a little and often, and hopeless at the ones that punish us catastrophically once. Then there is everybody else on the road. Speed is a social decision far more than a private one. A driver who decides, correctly, wisely, to slow to 25 miles an hour in dense fog immediately becomes the most dangerous object on that road. They have not removed themselves from the mechanism. They have become the obstacle it requires. The person behind them, in the same fog, with the same 0.2 of a second, is now closing on a nearly stationary vehicle. Slowing down is the right answer, and the road punishes it, and no amount of personal virtue solves that, because the correct decision only works if strangers make it at the same moment. The fog also lies about speed. With no roadside detail streaming past, no fence posts, no tree lines, no distant water tower drifting slowly across the window, the visual cues the brain uses to estimate velocity are simply gone. The world becomes a gray sphere 15 feet across that travels with the car. The engine note and the seat feel exactly as they did a mile back. Drivers routinely come out the far side of a fog bank surprised at how fast they were going, and the surprise is honest. Add the thing everyone does instinctively, which is to lock onto the tail lights ahead. Those 2 red points are the only information available, so the eyes take them and the foot follows them, and following becomes the whole task. The driver is now navigating by a vehicle whose driver is navigating by another vehicle. One decision, made once, at the front, by someone nobody behind can see. And when that front vehicle stops, the entire chain arrives. Getting out of the car afterward is not a lapse of judgment. It is a reflex built out of decency. Someone is hurt. Something might catch fire. The next driver needs warning. In almost every other collision in the world, on a clear road, on a city street, stepping out and putting on the hazards is the responsible act. Here the physics inverts it. The vehicle, the steel box with the crumple zones and the airbags and the reflective surfaces, is the safest object available, and a person standing beside it in a jacket is the least visible object on the highway, which means the valley kills over and over at the precise moment a person decides to help. And once that sequence starts, everything depends on how fast anyone else can get there. When 86 vehicles occupy a mile of highway in 3 tangled clusters, the fire engines and ambulances trying to reach the middle of it cannot use the highway, because the highway is the wreck. They come in from the ends and work inward, or they come across on farm roads and up an embankment, past the almond rows, dragging equipment over dirt, and they arrive into the same fog. There is no helicopter. A medical helicopter needs to see the ground it intends to land on, and on these mornings there is no ground to see. The aircraft that would normally cut 40 minutes off the trip to a trauma center sits on its pad with the rotor still, for exactly the same reason the crash happened. So the response is trucks, county fire, ambulance crews, highway crews with barricades and cones and message boards, and patrol officers walking the line on foot with flashlights, going car to car in the white, because walking is the only way to find out who is inside them, and the scene is still growing. For the first minutes, and sometimes far longer, traffic is still arriving. Upstream of the wreck, drivers are still in clear air or thin fog, doing 65 with no idea whatsoever. Officers working a pileup are working inside a hazard that is still running, and their own patrol cars, parked crosswise, light bars strobing into a gray wall that swallows them at 15 feet, are themselves obstacles for somebody. The only reliable fix is to shut the road, which is why one fiery pileup closed a 25-mile stretch of that highway for nearly 12 hours, and why a recent one closed it in both directions. Not because the wreckage covered 25 miles, but because there is no safe way to funnel traffic past a scene nobody can see, and the exits are miles apart in a valley laid out on a grid of 2-lane farm roads that were never built to swallow an interstate's worth of freight. Every one of those closures ripples outward across a food economy. Produce trucks idle on the shoulder for hours. Cold loads sit. A region that grows about 8% of the country's agriculture by value has one main artery down its middle, and on certain winter mornings it is closed by whether a person could walk through. The only real defense left is for the fog to be less common, which is what has been happening, and nobody planned it. Researchers went back through the satellite record and the ground observations and measured how much of each winter the valley actually spent under fog, from the 1st of November through the end of February. Across 32 winters, the fraction fell from about 30% of the season to about 16, a 46% reduction. When a separate team pulled the record back further, the shape got stranger. Dense fog in the Central Valley rose 85% across the middle of the 20th century. The fog got substantially worse for 40 years, and then fell 76% over the following 36 winters. Up, then down. Not the shape of a natural cycle, but the shape of an industrial one. A fog droplet cannot condense out of thin air. Each one needs a microscopic particle to form around. Through the middle of the 20th century, the valley's air was full of them, supplied in part by nitrogen oxide emissions from vehicles and industry. The same pollution that made the air hard to breathe was seeding the fog that made the road hard to drive. Then California began regulating that pollution, decade after decade, and the particles thinned out. The fog thinned with them. The relationship researchers put a number to is roughly 5 fewer fog days a year for every 10 parts per billion drop in nitrogen oxides. There is no villain anywhere in that sentence. Cleaner air is not a mistake. It is one of the great public health achievements of the last century, and in a valley carrying some of the worst particulate pollution in the country, it is what everybody wanted. The retreat of the fog is a side effect nobody asked for, nobody opposed, and nobody can be blamed for. The road got safer as an accident of breathing. Except the fog was never only a hazard. Out in the orchards, the almonds, the peaches, the pistachios, the plums, the trees that account for something like 95% of American fruit and nut production, the branches are bare and asleep in January, and that sleep has a requirement. To wake up properly and blossom on schedule, those trees need several hundred hours each winter in a narrow band of cold, roughly 32 to 45 degrees. Not freezing, just consistently, patiently cool. The fog is how the valley delivers it. A gray lid over the whole bowl shades the buds, holds the daytime temperature down, and keeps the cold hours accumulating through what would otherwise be a bright, warming afternoon. As the fog has thinned, those hours have gone with it. Within 3 decades, parts of the valley were getting as much as 400 fewer chill hours a year. So the same white morning that fills a highway with wreckage is the morning the orchard is waiting for. The valley's most reliable killer is also part of its farm equipment, and nobody gets to keep one and discard the other. Closing. Every year the fog thins, a few more drivers reach middle age on that highway, having never once driven into a wall of white where the world ends at the hood ornament. They have their license and the general knowledge that fog is bad. What they do not have is the memory in the hands, the specific physical experience of the moment visibility collapses, and the knowledge of what to do with the 10 seconds that follow. The hazard is becoming rarer without becoming gone, and the population that has to survive it is becoming less prepared, one winter at a time. It still forms after the first heavy rain. It still gathers on a clear, windless night. It still turns the taillights ahead into 2 soft red circles with no edges, which brings it back to a January morning, southbound, in 10 to 15 feet of visibility. A man of 61 was in a crash he survived, more than 30 years after an unnamed woman did the same thing on the same stretch of the same highway. He made the decision that anybody makes. He opened his door and stepped out onto the road into the fog to do whatever the moment seemed to require. He did not misjudge the danger, he simply could not see it. And neither could the driver who hit him. You are stopped. Sideways in a lane, engine ticking, airbag dust hanging in the cabin. You are unhurt. Somewhere ahead of you in the white, metal is still hitting metal. Someone is calling out. Your hand is already on the door handle and everything decent in you says, get out and help. Do you already know, before it ever happens, that you are supposed to stay in the car?